All right, so we had a great conversation coming back from Restore this year. About specifically the disconnect, the opportunities that exist, and the importance that we see in bringing up conversations about how members who may be on the edge of the church or who may be centered right in the middle of the church and all in between communicate with, minister to, and approach people who have left the church, who may be in the process of leaving the church or in complexity, or who are, could be considering it. So, a brief introduction. Scott Silva.
I'm Christine Silva.
We're married. And I've been a member of the church for about 27 years and served in all kinds of callings, and was solidly in simplicity for most of those 27 years. And a couple of years ago, something occurred that challenged some of a lot of my closely held beliefs, assumptions, and paradigms. And Christi as well, do you want to share what happened for you, just briefly?
A few years ago, one of our children came out to us as trans non-binary, and it was a moment of sort of coalescing for me. Some of the issues that had been brewing or growing for me suddenly became very of the moment and very central. And so as we helped our child and as our family sort of grew and changed and stretched in different ways, it was the time for me to step away from the church.
And when that happened, it threw me immediately into complexity and mentally into complexity. And I struggled with it. I had a lot of reactions, pretty typical reactions, I think, of somebody who's kind of tight within the framework of the organization of the church. But since then, I've sought, first of all, to understand our child, and that just opened everything up. So I'm still participating in the church. I hold calling in the church, and still go and participate. But I do so on my own terms more now. I have a more universalist approach to the love of God. So, what we wanted to talk about today, Christi, do you want to start out with, first of all, Melissa Inouye's podcast, listened to it many times, with David
Ostler.
David Ostler, yep, who wrote the book Bridges, of course, and it's fantastic. And as we were coming back from Restore, felt really strongly that this conversation really needs to come up again and really become an active part of those who are in the Faith Matters community that want to participate, but everybody from the bottom up. So, go ahead and share about Mallory and Diana's experience.
we really enjoyed Mallory and Diana and what they shared about the empathy gap between so many members and singles and what it's like to be a single in the church, and how those that are members could possibly maybe be a little bit more aware of how they speak to and about singles. And as somebody attending Restore who is more on the outside than the inside of the church at this point, I was familiar with some of the things that they were talking about. And so I think that sort of brought up some of those conversations on our drive home, that for being there at Restore I felt so included. And so there were so many messages that I could connect with. And I felt like I was in a room full of people who did understand so many of the reasons why it's hard for me to go to church on any given Sunday. And that the people there at Restore were in their awareness could also be a bit of a bridge that or a model for those who are still learning about the empathy gap that they're not yet aware of, that how they speak to and about people who have left the church is probably not as welcoming as they might think.
Yeah. You made a great comment related to that on the drive home about creating groups and communities among people who are more in the mode of perplexity, and in new harmony. Faith matters. I thought that was really a really great point.
I think that makes it sound a little more organized than maybe I imagined. I think what I imagined in that moment was that there's times when it's really hard to speak up in a class or in a lesson and contradict or give a little wider perspective, because there's a fear that the consensus view might not be welcoming of those different points of view. But there's been times when you know that so-and-so across the room has a similar viewpoint and would also benefit from hearing a little bit more of an inclusive message. And that when we know that there are other people in our ward, in our communities that attend Restore, that have some of these more inclusive opportunities to share, that we feel like we have a community within a community, and that it gives us a little bit more courage, a little bit more space to be that welcoming voice that we want to be.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, experiencing the love of God is experiencing relationships. Mm-hmm. That's the basis of it, and that's a great way to do it. There's several points that we kind of coalesced in our talk or in our discussion on the way home. One is this was touched on. All these were pretty much all touched upon, just about in the podcast with David Ostler. But I think one place where I began is with the approach. There has to be, it seems to me, acknowledgement of how core membership approaches the church in certitude, in terms of the only true and living church on the face of the earth. In other words, that can settle people really easily into a paradigm or a dualistic thinking, where the paradigm is the covenant path, which we hear a lot about now, is the only path to exaltation. And off of that path is damnation. And it's a really bifurcated subject at that point. And so I think from that, a lot of what we were kind of talking about and going over in our discussion, trite comments, they seem trite to somebody in complexity. They seem perfectly genuine to somebody, solidly in the church. But they come off as they're misguided. Just as David Ostler says, there's a disconnect between the assumptions or the supposed understanding of leadership or members of the church, core members of the church, why people are leaving. Why do they leave? And so, that's, I think, acknowledging that and becoming more universalist in our understanding and our language toward the love of God. Adam Miller, Patrick Mason, of course, Father Richard Rohr, all and others speak about this so much better than I can, of course. But that seems to be a core launch pad and a basis for trying to needing to acknowledge that before we can actually open up and create and prioritize those relationships. One of the other things that I wrote down from our discussion is prioritizing salvation over relation. Mm-hmm. And the dualistic thinking of, if you're in the church, solidly in the church, you're okay. If you're out, it is darkness. You're not going to be with your family forever. I mean, it can get really hurtful, really dark, really quick. And I think a lot of the core members just intuitively, because they start from that basis, prioritize salvation over relation and the soul over the person. And it's a result of certitude. And the Lord never did this. He never taught this. He absolutely taught the opposite. He always ministered to the person. And he knew that his love was genuine. These were my thoughts and feelings. So building language, David Ostler, his book is fantastic. Building language that acknowledges the grief, the feelings, the reasonings of non-practicing members. And recently we had a fantastic member teach an elders quorum lesson. His family actually taught it, and their grief counselors, they had a tragic accident with their daughter who was pregnant at the time, who passed away. And one of the things he said is pretty much the only thing that they wanted to hear and could hear and not hurt in their grieving process was, quote, "You've been on my mind lately, and I love you," and leaving it there. He said, that's about as much as I could handle. Not anything beyond that. Not, hey, if you want to talk to me, nothing like that. Just leaving it there and allowing the other person. It creates respect and where genuine conversation can start. Real quick. So the middle part of this is kind of mostly mine, and then we're going to get into the real good stuff. Christi's going to share some things from her heart. The parable of the lost sheep, I want to go over that, or just mention it really fast. It was not given in the context of the fold as a or the church, but the fold as a community. At that point, Christ had not set up his church, and there's indications that, his church was to be perhaps different than what it turned out to be. Obviously, there was a falling away, if we follow that thread. But yet we now exclusively teach the opposite, that the fold is the church and only the church, rather than, and it absolutely jumps right in front of relationships. It becomes the priority. Okay. John Gustav Rithal, thank you so much for having him. His vulnerability, his honesty, his integrity, his example was absolutely thrilling to me. But one of the things he says is, you don't want to talk about the allies. I think it really touched your heart too.
It did. When he spoke about the need for those who are allies to participate and to remain. Many can't, and he spoke about the difference between pain and discomfort, and I think that was a really needful and helpful distinction. But that request definitely did strike in my heart, because I do want to continue to participate as much as I can in our local area with people that we care about and those who are vulnerable. And there's both space and comfort and discomfort and pain in that. And so that's where it's complicated, to be both present to support those who are marginalized and also to protect those that I love and to protect myself. It's not an easy spot to be.
Yeah, it was amazing. There's so many more things that he said that truly touched my heart. All right, so couple of the points that I can't wait to hear from you on. Do you want to take that one?
I think that discomfort that I just spoke of is that as much as I still connect with many other people in our area and in our ward and many of the messages, I don't feel that there's a role for me because I don't want to attend, I don't want to be a disruptive voice. People attend their ward meeting and their lessons in order to feel the connection and the affirmation of the faith that they hold dear. And it's not my role to go there and to be an upsetting voice or presence of causing any discomfort. That's not appropriate. So I haven't quite found a way to both stand up for what I value and to participate.
That's huge. And understanding that as a member solidly within the core of the church with empathy before all else, it has to be where it started, where the relationship is prioritized. But that dialogue often doesn't happen because we're not really talking about this. We're in so many ways living in fear or even subliminal fear regarding people who are in complexity and who considering in the process of or have left.
Well, I think that's also one of the things that Mallory and Diana touched on, which I thought was so fun, was that singles have a lot of strengths to offer their community. And I think that that's also true of multi-faith families that have gone through some of these trials of their faith, or who have within their family somebody who is non-believing or not attending. Those families are not just wounded or not just on the outside. They're actually families that have worked really hard to communicate and to be strong partners to each other and to support each other in their different roles and different understanding and different belief systems. So I think that there's a lot that these families have to offer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we're a family of 4 kids. Our oldest daughter is married and out of the house, no longer attending. Married the son of our bishop. And her husband is no longer attending either. And then we have our trans-binary kiddo, and then 2 younger boys, none of whom are attending currently. And that was one of the biggest shocks to me immediately. So I can totally relate to that. It's like a survival instinct almost when someone close to you steps off the path, but you are a black and white thinker when it comes to covenant path, off the covenant path. Thank goodness for complexity, because it gave me a whole new vista from which to understand better the love of God, and then sink deep into the relationships and prioritize my relationships over everything else. He already knows. I believe that. He's already got it all taken care of. We just have to be really, really loving, good human beings with good values. That's the basis. So thank you for indulging us. I just thought that it was such an enlivening discussion on our way home, and it was all based on, for me, the inspirations and the experience at Restore. So of course, thank you very much.
That's amazing
for that. And I guess our purpose is just to share this with you. Living it, I think I know me still in the church. I don't say that regretfully, but I say it with still in complexity, actually. But I see a true need. And I just, it's amazing, we're going to have our stake conference this Saturday, Sunday. And I just shared with stake presidency the podcast with David Ostler. And because one of their lessons, he said, I'm looking for thoughts and frameworks to work with him. This is the lesson that he wanted to teach. And so, pretty awesome. So whatever you want to do with this, I hope it helps. I hope it's helpful. And we appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.